Someday I will go to Aarhus. From the opening line of this poem, we realise that Heaney is not writing about a memory here. He's writing about what he imagines he will do. It's a futuristic exploration of a situation that he finds significance, even though he hasn't yet experienced it. And so the Tollund Man becomes iconic and mythic in representing ideas that echo Heaney's situation. The adverbials "someday," "in the flat country," "where they dug him out," construct a sense of place, but it's an imagined place. It hasn't happened yet, except for the fact that in that place they did dig him out. If you look at the pronouns I, his, his, all of it is about him. Heaney imagines this man, who he is, what he is. And it's all about the significance of what has been discovered in this ancient mummified man. I will go to Aarhus to see his peat-brown head, the millpods of his eyelids, his pointed skin cap. If you look at the first stanza there, we have a very simple description of this man. We still don't know who he was or what happened to him exactly. There are lots of theories about whether he was executed for a religious reason, or there may have been a murder. Who knows really what happened? But upon that man, people put significance, which reflect their ideological views, and that's what Heaney's doing in this text. In the flat country nearby, where they dug him out. Those adverbials place us imaginatively, intellectually, in that area. And yet when we read the whole poem, we realise that that area is also like Ireland, a bog country, an island where religious intolerance, religious ritual is causing the death of some men. His last gruel of winter seeds caked in his stomach. The last gruel echoing the last temptation. Sorry, not the last temptation, the last meal of Christ before his execution. And so the character of the Tollund Man becomes a surrogate Christ figure, a man executed possibly for the good of all, for the community. Look at the contemplation of the long vowels. Someday I will go to Aarhus to see his peat-brown head. And contrast that with the interplay of short vowels, pods, his eyelids, skin cap, stomach. There's a sense of the reality being more clipped, more pronounced through those shorter vowels. In this illustration we can see one artist's imagined view of the Tollund Man, and if you have time, go to the link, as you can see there, and explore the different ideas as to why this man was killed. This imagination sees the man hung over the bog, and people around are using it as a religious rite to aid the fertility goddess or to bless the harvest. In the flat country nearby where they dug him out, his last gruel of winter seeds caked in his stomach, naked except for the cap, noose and girdle, I will stand a long time. That last declarative statement, I will stand a long time, with its slow vowels, its longer vowels, show Heaney's anticipation of how he will spend some time contemplating this remnant of a man. Naked except for the cap, noose and girdle. That's all we have that have survived. A naked, exposed man, nothing to tell who he was exactly. He's labelled the bridegroom to the goddess. She tightened her torc on him and opened her fen, those dark juices working him to a saint's kept body. The metaphor of the bridegroom is interesting. Not only does it echo the bridegroom of Christ and his relationship with the church in Catholicism, we have here a bridegroom who is being wedded to the goddess of nature. She tightened her torc on him and opened her fen. Interestingly, she's seen almost as dominant and powerful. He is subservient to her. He sacrifices himself to her. But it's her who is also destroying him. She tightened her torc on him. The torc, as you can see in the illustrations here, is a twisted rope. And it is that strangles him. So metaphorically, her grip, her control of him destroys him. But ironically, she opens her fen, and her dark juices working him to a saint's kept body create the icon that he has become. They sustain him, preserving him. This consummation here, a bridegroom and a bride, is sexual, but is also destructive and powerful, mysterious. The dark juices working him to a saint's kept body. This kept body has become the treasure, the trove of the turfcutters, who've uncovered this secret, interesting find in their honeycombed workings. And then the adverbial now, thousands of years later, his stained face reposes at Aarhus. Interestingly, the face is stained, a negative word here. This dedication of the Tollund Man to sacrifice himself, to wed himself to death in a self-sacrificial ritual, is what sustains him ultimately. And now Heaney makes the link, the significance, to his Irish context. Don't forget, he hasn't yet been there and seen this, but he imagines the Tollund Man, and he imagines it like some saint's relic that in Catholicism people would pray to for healing or guidance. I could risk blasphemy, he says, consecrate the cauldron bog, our holy ground, and pray him to make germinate the scattered, ambushed flesh of labourers, stockinged corpses laid out in the farmyards, telltale skin and teeth flecking the sleepers of 4 young brothers, trailed for miles along the lines. Here you have a narrative of 4 murdered labourers, ordinary Irish folk, killed in their struggle, political and violent, with British rule. They've been scattered and ambushed, they're dead, but also something has been degraded. There are telltale signs of skin and teeth, as if something's been exploded or violently destroyed. And yet the stockinged corpses is very knowing. These are ordinary men, brothers, friends, relatives, and they've been laid out with respect. If you look at the pronouns here, you have I and him. Again, it's a personal view of who he is, the Tollund Man, and what he represents. And he becomes a holy relic here that we might pray to make germinate the scattered, as if you could bring back from the dead these men, or if you could use their deaths to germinate something new, to bring significance from that. Are the sacrificial deaths of the Tollund Man effective? Are the deaths of Catholic fighters going to bring about this new world that they hope for? The 4 young brothers trailed for miles along the lines. On one level, there's a sort of macabre thing here, as if they've been dragged and shredded in their deaths. But there's also a sense that this story, this narrative, has been promoted and shared along the miles, and they've become consecrated, almost martyred. And the memory of these four Catholic labourers, like the Tollund Man, has got mythic significance. If you look at the pictures in this slide, you'll see the tumbrel. The tumbrel was very well known in the Reign of Terror in Paris during the Revolution, when they would take prisoners from their prison cells to the guillotine, and they would be paraded through the streets in this caged carriage. You can see on the bottom right an example of that. But also on the top right, interestingly, there's some Irish nuns using the tumbrel to collect the sods from the peat. So this vehicle is known. Something of his sad freedom as he rode the tumbrel should come to me driving, saying the names Tolland, Graubaul, Nebelgard, watching the pointing hands of country people not knowing their tongue, out there in Jutland on the old man-killing parishes. I will feel lost, unhappy, and at home. This stanza, this section of 3 stanzas, draws the affinity and significance that Heaney feels in Catholic Ireland, a place of violence and destruction, with the affinity he sees in Jutland, or imagines. He imagines he will go there on this pilgrimage, and he will know too well, whilst driving, an affinity of moving to the place of execution where the Tollund Man died. And he will be watching, driving, watching the progressive verbs as he imagines himself. And he assumes, again, this is all him imagining what will be. He layers the significance and the meaning on an imagined act, a pilgrimage to this place, to add validity to an ancient relic. It is an act of worship. It is an act of aggrandizing violence in one sense. He will feel lost and unhappy because he is not content with this state of affairs. But he also has to recognize at the end he will feel at home, and those last adjectives sum up the affinity Heaney has. In the first section, Heaney adopts the role of a follower, a pilgrim, determined to go and pay homage, show worthship or worship, to venerate the icon that is the Tollund Man. Yet the someday adverbial is imprecise, more of a vague intention. He wants to see the remains of the man, listed simply here as his head, eye, eyelids, cap. He is an ordinary man, generic, like a universal remnant. Even though he was a sacrifice for some ancient ritual with his last supper of winter seeds, Heaney is prepared to pay homage. He then explores the ritual of the man wedded to death. He is seen as a bridegroom whose only consummation and fulfillment is in his union with the fertility goddess. The sensuality of this is evoked in the power over him, which she has seduced him, reduced him to being a victim. Her torc kills him, and her open fen and its mysterious juices consume him, yet preserve him too, so that she is at once the destroyer and preserver of him. So he is then a relic, an icon of the religious ritual, and that in that sense he's like a Catholic saint. In these 3 pictures from Northern Ireland in the Troubles, you can see the victims of some violent action. the bloodied remains of men on the street, the services struggling to contain order, to bring about order, or to impose order. Heaney develops the parallel with Ireland. It extends the metaphor of the religion here. His suggestion, he seems to say, is blasphemous. He might be so bold as to pray to the Tollund Man. Here we see him as a surrogate Christ figure. Both men were sacrificed for the community to pay the price for something. And in praying for the dead, for the 4 slaughtered labourers who it seems have been blasted to pieces and shredded in the name of some sectarian violence, Heaney draws a strong parallel. The bog is shown to be a cauldron with connotations of witchcraft and ritual, but he would hope in the prayer to resurrect the fallen dead, the men killed for Ireland, those ordinary men who are seen here as with flesh and stockinged corpses. They're killed in the landscape. The adjective stockinged adds a rather quaint domestic knowingness to these ordinary men, fighting off their British oppressors, but whose bloody end is shredded over the landscape. These sleepers are the dead, splattered with body parts of the victims of some attack. It is as if the victims seem asleep, yet are splattered, and now they are trailed in some macabre ritual along the lines, martyrs to some new ideology, just like the Tollund Man. In stanza 3, there is an imagined sense of the poet on his journey, on his pilgrimage, his driving to the strange lands of Denmark suggested by the list of names, the tension in the sad freedom of a man released to death is imagined as Heaney drives to the place of ritual death, even as the Tollund Man was carried in the cart, the tumbrel. Heaney feels alien here, as if he is a stranger in the Danish past, but whilst he won't know their tongue, he knows shrewdly that humanity is the same. He will recognise the man-killing parishes that are defined as old here, for there is nothing new in human behaviour. Heaney imagines the sense of feeling lost on his journey and of being unhappy, but he also says that he will feel at home, the telling link that he sees this ritual killing and ideological martyrdom in his own land. It is not strange after all. Men have forever sacrificed themselves for their beliefs, and the Tollund Man becomes a mythic everyman that is in the heart of our own fervent beliefs.